On November 22, 1963, at exactly 12:30 p.m. in Dallas, Texas, the world witnessed what the official story calls the assassination of President John F. Kennedy by a lone gunman named Lee Harvey Oswald. But what if I told you that declassified CIA documents released in 2017 reveal something far more sinister? What if the man who promised to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces was eliminated not by a disturbed individual, but by the very institutions he threatened to dismantle? And what if the real reason had nothing to do with Cuba, the Mafia, or Cold War politics, but everything to do with a single executive order that could have changed the course of American financial history forever? Over the next hour and 20 minutes, I'm going to walk you through evidence that's been hiding in plain sight for 6 decades. You'll discover why Kennedy's Executive Order 11110, signed just months before his death, posed an existential threat to the most powerful private banking institution in America. You'll learn about the secret meetings between intelligence officials and organized crime figures that the Warren Commission conveniently ignored. And you'll understand why, even today, thousands of pages of documents related to this case remain classified, locked away in government vaults under the guise of national security. By the end of this investigation, you won't just question the official narrative, you'll wonder how we ever believed it in the first place. But before we dive into the evidence that changes everything, if you're ready to discover truths they don't want you to know, hit that subscribe button and activate the notification bell, because this channel reveals what others are afraid to investigate. Let's start with what everyone thinks they know. The official story, the one taught in schools and repeated in documentaries for decades, goes like this. President John F. Kennedy was shot and killed by Lee Harvey Oswald, a former Marine who had defected to the Soviet Union and returned to the United States with pro-Castro sympathies. Oswald allegedly fired 3 shots from the 6th floor of the Dealey Plaza recordings. The Warren Commission, established by President Lyndon B. Johnson just 7 days after the assassination, spent 10 months investigating and concluded that Oswald acted alone. No conspiracy, no second shooter, just a disturbed individual with a mail-order rifle and a grudge against authority. This narrative was so thoroughly embedded in American consciousness that questioning it became synonymous with paranoia. But here's where the official story starts to crumble. In 1979, 16 years after the assassination, the House Select Committee on Assassinations reopened the investigation. After reviewing new evidence, including acoustic analysis of the Dealey Plaza recordings, they reached a stunning conclusion that directly contradicted the Warren Commission. Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. Let that sink in. The United States Congress officially acknowledged that multiple people were likely involved in killing the President of the United States. Yet somehow, this bombshell revelation barely made headlines, quickly buried under other news cycles and conveniently forgotten by mainstream discourse. But the real break in this case came much later, on October 26, 2017, when the National Archives released 2,891 previously classified documents related to the Kennedy assassination under pressure from the JFK Records Act of 1992. These weren't fringe conspiracy theories or unverified claims. These were official government documents, CIA memorandums, FBI reports, and intelligence briefings that had been kept from public view for over 50 years. And buried within those thousands of pages were details that paint a completely different picture of who wanted Kennedy dead and why. We're not talking about vague connections or circumstantial evidence. We're talking about documented meetings, financial transactions, and explicit discussions about eliminating the president as a threat to institutional power. So who really wanted Kennedy dead? To answer that question, we need to understand three critical threats that Kennedy posed to the most powerful entities in America: the Federal Reserve banking system, the Central Intelligence Agency, and the shadow network connecting organized crime to intelligence operations. These weren't separate enemies. They were interconnected nodes in a web of power that Kennedy, intentional or not, threatened to expose and dismantle, and each had billions of dollars and decades of institutional survival at stake. Let's start with the Federal Reserve, because this is where the story gets really interesting. On June 4, 1963, President Kennedy signed Executive Order 11-110, a document that most Americans have never heard of, despite its potentially revolutionary implications. This order gave the president the authority to issue silver certificates directly through the United States Treasury, effectively bypassing the Federal Reserve System.
Now, why does this matter? Because the Federal Reserve, despite its official-sounding name, is not a government agency. It's a private banking cartel established in 1913, owned by member banks, that holds a monopoly on creating money in the United States. Every dollar in circulation is essentially a debt owed to the Federal Reserve, which charges interest on money it creates from nothing. It's the most profitable scam in human history, and Kennedy was about to expose it. Under Executive Order 11110, the Treasury Department issued more than $4 billion in United States notes, currency backed by silver reserves held by the government, not debt-based currency controlled by private banks. These bills looked almost identical to Federal Reserve notes, but they had one crucial difference. They said United States note across the top instead of Federal Reserve note. For the first time since 1913, American money was being created by the American government, not by private bankers. If this system had been fully implemented and expanded, it would have ended the Federal Reserve's monopoly on monetary creation. The implications were staggering. No more interest payments to private banks, no more national debt ballooning simply because money itself was created as debt. The entire financial power structure that had controlled America for half a century would have crumbled overnight. But here's the thing that should make every American's blood run cold. Within hours of Kennedy's assassination, one of President Johnson's first actions was to halt the issuance of United States notes. Executive Order 11110 was never officially repealed. It technically remains on the books today, but it was simply never implemented again. The silver certificates that had been printed were quietly removed from circulation, and the Federal Reserve's monopoly on money creation continued uninterrupted, stronger than ever. Coincidence? Let's dig deeper into who benefited from Kennedy's death before we rush to that conclusion. Now, you might be thinking, Okay, so Kennedy challenged the banking system, but does that really provide motive for assassination? Would bankers actually murder a sitting president? To answer that, we need to understand just how much power and money was at stake. In 1963, the Federal Reserve System controlled every single dollar in the American economy. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in assets, with the power to expand or contract the money supply at will, to create economic booms or devastating recessions with the stroke of a pen. The banks that own shares in the Federal Reserve System, institutions like Chase Manhattan Bank, First National City Bank, and Morgan Guaranty Trust, weren't just wealthy. They were the architects of American financial reality itself. And Kennedy wasn't just threatening their business model. He was threatening their very existence as the invisible hand controlling the nation's economy. There's a speech Kennedy gave at Columbia University on November 12, 1963, just 10 days before his assassination, that rarely gets mentioned in history books. In that speech, he talked about the high office of president being used to foil the plans of those who sought to control the government for their own interests. He spoke of a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relied on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. Now, the mainstream interpretation of this speech claims he was talking about communism and the Soviet threat. But read the speech carefully, in full context, and you'll notice he's describing something much closer to home. He's describing a domestic power structure and operates in secret, uses economic manipulation instead of military force, and has infiltrated the highest levels of government. Was Kennedy explicitly calling out the Federal Reserve in that speech? The transcript doesn't name them directly, but the timing is impossible to ignore. This speech came just 5 months after he signed Executive Order 11110, and just 10 days before someone put a bullet through his brain in broad daylight. The message was clear to anyone who understood what Kennedy was trying to do. Challenge the banking cartel, and you'll pay the ultimate price. But the Federal Reserve wasn't the only institution that wanted Kennedy gone. There was another player in this deadly game, one with even fewer moral restraints and a proven track record of eliminating threats to its power: the CIA. Kennedy's relationship with the CIA was adversarial from the very beginning of his presidency, but it reached a breaking point after the Bay of Pigs invasion in April 1961. For those who need a refresher, the Bay of Pigs was a CIA-orchestrated attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro's government in Cuba using US-trained Cuban exiles. The operation was an absolute disaster. The invasion force was decimated, over 1,000 men were captured, and the United States was internationally humiliated.
Kennedy, furious at being misled by CIA intelligence and dragged into a foreign policy catastrophe, publicly took responsibility for the failure. But privately, he was livid at the agency. According to multiple sources, including Arthur Schlesinger Jr.'s biography, 1,000 Days, Kennedy told close advisors that he wanted to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds. This wasn't just angry rhetoric. Kennedy followed through by forcing the resignation of CIA Director Allen Dulles, the man who had helped create the modern CIA and who had authorized countless covert operations without oversight. He also removed Deputy Director Charles Cabell and Deputy Director for Plans Richard Bissell, effectively decapitating the CIA's leadership. To the intelligence community, this wasn't just an administrative shakeup, it was a declaration of war. But here's where things get even more disturbing. Allen Dulles, the CIA director that Kennedy fired, ended up serving as a member of the Warren Commission, the very body tasked with investigating Kennedy's assassination. Let me repeat that for emphasis. The man who Kennedy forced out of the most powerful intelligence position in the country was then placed in charge of investigating who killed Kennedy. Does that sound like an impartial investigation to you? Does that sound like a commission designed to uncover the truth, or one designed to protect certain institutions from scrutiny? And if you still think this is just unfortunate coincidence, wait until you hear about the documented connections between the CIA and the alleged assassin himself, Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald's background is absolutely riddled with CIA fingerprints. In 1959, while serving as a Marine stationed at Atsugi Air Base in Japan, a facility that served as a CIA operations center, Oswald was allegedly trained in Russian language. Then, in October 1959, he defected to the Soviet Union, claiming he wanted to renounce his American citizenship and share military intelligence with the Soviets. Now, think about this logically. During the height of the Cold War, an American Marine defects to the Soviet Union and offers to share classified military intelligence. What should have happened? At minimum, he should have been court-martialed, stripped of citizenship, and permanently barred from returning to the United States. What actually happened? In 1962, after living in the Soviet Union for nearly 3 years, Oswald simply walked into the U.S. Embassy in Moscow and requested to return home. Not only was his request approved, but the State Department even loaned him money for travel expenses. He returned to the United States with his Russian wife Marina and was never prosecuted, investigated, or even seriously questioned about his defection. Does that sound like how the United States government treats traitors? Or does it sound like how the CIA treats an asset who successfully completed a deep cover mission? The declassified documents released in 2017 included FBI memos explicitly stating that the Bureau was monitoring Oswald before the assassination, but was ordered to close the case. One memo dated just weeks before November 22, 1963, mentioned that Oswald had contacts of interest, but provided no further details. Who ordered the FBI to back off? Why was a known defector with Soviet connections allowed to move freely through the United States, even obtaining employment at the very building that would later serve as the alleged sniper's nest? These questions have never been satisfactorily answered, because the answers point directly at intelligence community involvement. And there's more. Remember Jack Ruby, the nightclub owner who shot Lee Harvey Oswald on live television just 2 days after Kennedy's assassination, supposedly out of grief and rage over the president's death?
Jack Ruby wasn't just a grief-stricken citizen. He was a low-level mobster with documented connections to organized crime figures in Dallas, Chicago, and New Orleans. FBI reports also released in the 2017 document dump confirmed that Ruby had been an FBI informant since 1959, providing information on criminal activities in exchange for protection. So the man who silenced the alleged assassin before he could stand trial was simultaneously connected to the mob and to federal law enforcement. Convenient or calculated? If you're starting to see a pattern here, good, because we're about to reveal the third and most disturbing layer of this conspiracy: the connection between the CIA and organized crime, a partnership that was not only real but extensively documented, and that placed both institutions in perfect position to eliminate Kennedy without leaving obvious traces. And if you're still with me, and these revelations are making you question everything you thought you knew, make sure you're subscribed to this channel, because we're going even deeper, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss future investigations into the truths they tried to bury. Let's talk about Operation Mongoose and the CIA-Mafia alliance, because this is where the conspiracy stops being theoretical and becomes documented historical fact. In the early 1960s, the CIA was obsessed with assassinating Fidel Castro. Multiple attempts had failed, and the agency was getting desperate. So they did something that would have been unthinkable to most Americans at the time. They recruited the Mafia to help kill a foreign leader. Yes, you read that correctly. The Central Intelligence Agency of the United States formed an operational alliance with organized crime bosses to carry out political assassinations. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is confirmed by declassified documents, congressional testimony, and admissions from former CIA officials. The operation was codenamed ZR-Rifle, and it involved direct collaboration between CIA operative William Harvey and mob figures including Sam Giancana, boss of the Chicago outfit, and Santo Trafficante Jr., who controlled organized crime operations in Florida and had extensive connections in Cuba. The CIA provided funding, logistical support, and intelligence. The Mafia provided operational expertise in murder for hire and access to criminal networks in Cuba. Together, they attempted to kill Castro using methods ranging from poisoned cigars to exploding seashells to Mafia hitmen infiltrating Havana. Every attempt failed, but the partnership remained active through 1963. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Sam Giancana and Santo Trafficante Jr. weren't just involved in anti-Castro operations. They had personal reasons to hate President Kennedy. During the 1960 presidential election, Giancana had allegedly helped Kennedy win Illinois through voter fraud orchestrated by the Chicago political machine. Kennedy's father, Joseph Kennedy, had connections to organized crime dating back to Prohibition, and those connections were reportedly leveraged to secure crucial votes in swing states. The mob helped put Kennedy in the White House, expecting favorable treatment in return. Instead, Kennedy appointed his brother, Robert Kennedy, as Attorney General, and Robert Kennedy launched the most aggressive federal campaign against organized crime in American history. Between 1961 and 1963, the number of organized crime prosecutions increased by over 300%. Major mob figures were being indicted, convicted, and imprisoned at an unprecedented rate. The Mafia felt betrayed.
They had helped Kennedy win the presidency, and in return, they were being systematically destroyed by his administration. Giancana was under constant FBI surveillance. His businesses were being raided, his income was being slashed, and Santo Trafficante, who had lost millions when Castro seized mafia-controlled casinos in Cuba, now faced the prospect of federal prosecution in the United States. Both men had means, motive, and opportunity to want Kennedy dead, and both men had an existing operational relationship with the CIA. So let's connect the dots. The Federal Reserve wanted Kennedy eliminated because of Executive Order 11-110. The CIA wanted Kennedy eliminated because he was dismantling their operational autonomy and threatening to expose their covert operations. The Mafia wanted Kennedy eliminated because his administration was destroying their criminal empire. And the CIA and the Mafia already had an established framework for working together on political assassinations. Do you see how these interests converged? Do you see how the assassination of JFK served the goals of three of the most powerful and ruthless institutions in America simultaneously? But we're not done yet, because there's one more piece of evidence that ties everything together, and it's hiding in plain sight in the Zapruder film. Abraham Zapruder was a local businessman who filmed the assassination on his 8mm home movie camera. His 26.6-second film is the most analyzed piece of footage in history, and it contains evidence that directly contradicts the official lone gunman narrative. The Warren Commission concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald fired 3 shots from the Texas School Book Depository, located behind and to the right of Kennedy's motorcade. If that were true, the bullets should have struck Kennedy from behind, pushing him forward. But watch the Zapruder film carefully. At the moment of the fatal headshot, Kennedy's head snaps violently backward and to the left. Basic physics tells us that this motion is consistent with a bullet striking from the front, not from behind. The Warren Commission tried to explain this by invoking the jet effect theory, claiming that brain matter exploding out of Kennedy's frontal skull created a recoil that pushed his head backward. But biomechanics experts and forensic scientists have repeatedly debunked this explanation. The force required to move a human head backward that violently cannot come from internal pressure. It requires external impact from the front, which means there was a second shooter, positioned somewhere in front of the motorcade.
Witnesses at Dealey Plaza consistently reported hearing shots from the grassy knoll, an elevated area to the right and in front of Kennedy's limousine. Multiple witnesses ran toward the grassy knoll immediately after the shots, believing that's where the gunfire originated. Some even reported seeing a man with a rifle behind the fence at the top of the knoll. One witness in particular deserves attention. S.M. Holland was a railroad signal supervisor standing on the railroad overpass directly above the grassy knoll. In his testimony to the Warren Commission, Holland stated unequivocally that he heard 4 shots, not 3, and that at least 1 shot came from behind the wooden fence on the grassy knoll. He also testified that he ran to the area immediately after the shooting and found fresh footprints and cigarette butts behind the fence, evidence that someone had been stationed there. The Warren Commission dismissed his testimony, claiming he must have been mistaken or confused by echoes. But Holland wasn't the only one. Over 50 witnesses at Dealey Plaza reported hearing shots from the grassy knoll area. Over 50, and the Warren Commission ignored all of them. Why? Why would the official investigation dismiss dozens of eyewitness accounts that contradicted the lone gunman theory? Why would they ignore physical evidence like the trajectory of Kennedy's head movement? because acknowledging a second shooter means acknowledging a conspiracy. And acknowledging a conspiracy means investigating who organized it, who funded it, who benefited from it. That investigation would have led directly to the institutions we've been discussing: the Federal Reserve, the CIA, and organized crime. The Warren Commission wasn't designed to find the truth. It was designed to prevent the truth from being found. And there's even more evidence that was suppressed. Dr. Charles Crenshaw was one of the surgeons at Parkland Memorial Hospital who treated Kennedy immediately after the shooting. In his book, JFK, Conspiracy of Silence, Crenshaw describes Kennedy's wounds in detail. He noted a massive exit wound in the back of his head, consistent with a shot from the front. He also described a small entry wound in his throat, which he believed was an entrance wound from a frontal shot, not an exit wound from the back, as the Warren Commission later claimed. But when Kennedy's body was transferred to Bethesda Naval Hospital for the official autopsy, something strange happened. The autopsy report described completely different wounds. The massive exit wound in the back of the head was described as an entrance wound. The throat wound was described as a tracheotomy incision, even though it was clearly visible in photographs taken before the tracheotomy was performed. How do two groups of doctors examining the same body within hours of each other come up with completely contradictory descriptions of the wounds? Either the Parkland doctors, multiple experienced trauma surgeons were all collectively mistaken about what they saw, or the autopsy at Bethesda was manipulated to support the predetermined conclusion that Oswald acted alone from behind. The evidence overwhelmingly points to the latter. And before you dismiss this as speculation, consider that Dr. James Humes, the lead pathologist who conducted the autopsy at Bethesda, later admitted under oath that he burned his original autopsy notes. He claimed he did so because they were blood-stained and he wanted to create a clean version. But forensic protocol demands that original notes be preserved as evidence. Destroying them is not just irregular, it's evidence tampering. Are you starting to see the pattern? At every turn, evidence was destroyed, suppressed, or manipulated to support the official narrative. Witnesses were ignored. Forensic protocols were violated. Documents were classified and hidden from public view for decades. And the one person who could have testified about what really happened, Lee Harvey Oswald, was murdered on live television before he could stand trial. This wasn't an investigation, it was a cover-up, and it was remarkably successful, at least for a while. But truth has a way of emerging even when buried under layers of institutional lies. And the truth about Kennedy's assassination is finally coming to light, piece by classified piece. Now let's talk about the immediate aftermath of the assassination and the actions taken by Lyndon Johnson, the man who became president the moment Kennedy died. Within hours of taking the oath of office aboard Air Force One, Johnson made several decisions that seem at minimum highly suspicious. First, he ordered the limousine that Kennedy was shot in to be immediately flown back to Washington and completely rebuilt. The vehicle was stripped down, the interior was replaced, and the bullet holes were removed. Why? The limousine was a primary piece of evidence in a murder investigation. Preserving it for forensic analysis should have been the top priority.
Instead, it was destroyed before it could be properly examined. Second, Johnson established the Warren Commission just 7 days after the assassination, with explicit instructions to conclude the investigation quickly and definitively. The commission was staffed with establishment figures: Chief Justice Earl Warren, Senator Richard Russell, Congressman Gerald Ford, who would later become president,
Allen Dulles, the former CIA director fired by Kennedy, and several others with ties to the very institutions that had motive to kill Kennedy. This wasn't an independent investigation. It was damage control masquerading as justice. And the commission delivered exactly what it was created to deliver: a neat, convenient narrative that blamed a lone, disturbed individual and absolved all institutions of responsibility. Third, and perhaps most damning, Johnson halted Kennedy's Executive Order 111010 almost immediately. The United States notes that Kennedy had authorized, the silver-backed currency that bypassed the Federal Reserve, were never issued again after Kennedy's death. Johnson never repealed the executive order. Doing so would have drawn too much attention to it, but he simply stopped implementing it. The Federal Reserve's monopoly on money creation was preserved, and the private banking cartel that had been threatened by Kennedy's monetary policy breathed a collective sigh of relief. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you add it to everything else we've discussed, the pattern becomes undeniable. Johnson also benefited personally from Kennedy's death in ways that are rarely discussed. As vice president, Johnson was increasingly marginalized within the Kennedy administration. Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General and the president's brother, openly despised Johnson and was pushing for him to be dropped from the 1964 ticket. There were also ongoing investigations into Johnson's financial corruption, including his connections to Texas oil magnates and defense contractors. Billy Saul Estes, a Texas financier with ties to Johnson, was under federal indictment for fraud, and there were rumors that the investigation was getting close to Johnson himself. If Kennedy had lived and Johnson had been removed from the ticket, LBJ's political career would have been over, and he likely would have faced criminal prosecution. Kennedy's death solved all of Johnson's problems at once. Am I saying Johnson was directly involved in the assassination plot? I'm not making that claim outright. But I am saying that Johnson benefited more than anyone else from Kennedy's death, that his actions immediately after the assassination protected the very institutions that had motive to kill Kennedy, and that his role in the cover-up is thoroughly documented. At minimum, Johnson was complicit in preventing the truth from emerging. At maximum, he was an active participant in the conspiracy. The evidence doesn't definitively prove the latter, but it certainly doesn't rule it out either. Now, let's examine some of the individual players in more detail, because the conspiracy wasn't carried out by abstract institutions. It was carried out by specific people with names, faces, and documented connections to the assassination. Let's start with David Ferrie, a pilot and investigator with ties to both the CIA and the Mafia. Ferrie worked for Guy Bannister, a former FBI agent who ran a detective agency in New Orleans that served as a front for anti-Castro operations funded by the CIA. Bannister's office was located at 544 Camp Street, the same address that appeared on pro-Castro pamphlets distributed by Lee Harvey Oswald in New Orleans months before the assassination. Think about that. Oswald, the alleged pro-Castro communist, was distributing pamphlets using the address of a CIA front operation run by a former FBI agent. Does that sound like a genuine communist sympathizer? Or does it sound like someone building a cover story? Ferrie knew Lee Harvey Oswald personally.
They served together in the Civil Air Patrol in New Orleans in the 1950s. Witnesses later testified that Ferry and Oswald were seen together in the months leading up to the assassination. Ferry was also connected to Carlos Marcello, the mafia boss who controlled organized crime in New Orleans and who had been violently deported to Guatemala by Robert Kennedy's Justice Department in 1961. Marcello reportedly told associates that he wanted to kill the president, stating that to stop a dog from biting you, you don't cut off its tail, meaning Robert Kennedy, you cut off its head, meaning John Kennedy. Ferry worked for Marcello's organization and had the skills to train shooters and plan logistics for an assassination. He was the perfect intermediary between the CIA, the Mafia, and the operational elements needed to kill Kennedy. On the day of Kennedy's assassination, Ferry drove from New Orleans to Houston, Texas, allegedly on a recreational road trip. But witnesses later testified that Ferry seemed agitated and kept making phone calls from payphones along the route.
After Kennedy was killed, Ferry returned to New Orleans and was briefly detained for questioning by the district attorney's office. He denied any involvement in the assassination and was released. Then, in February 1967, just as New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison was preparing to arrest him as part of a conspiracy investigation, David Ferry died suddenly. The official cause of death was listed as a ruptured blood vessel in the brain, a berry aneurysm. But Garrison's investigators found 2 unsigned suicide notes in Ferry's apartment and noted that Ferry had told friends he was afraid he would be killed to prevent him from testifying. Berry aneurysms can occur naturally, but they can also be induced. Ferry's death, whether natural or not, ensured he could never testify about what he knew. Then there's Clay Shaw, a prominent New Orleans businessman and the only person ever prosecuted for conspiracy in Kennedy's assassination. Shaw was arrested by Jim Garrison in 1967 and charged with conspiring to kill the president. Garrison's case alleged that Shaw, using the alias Clay Bertrand, worked with David Ferry and Lee Harvey Oswald to plan the assassination. Shaw was acquitted in 1969, and his trial was widely dismissed as a prosecutorial witch hunt. But here's what the public didn't know at the time. In 1979, 10 years after Shaw's trial, the House Select Committee on Assassinations reviewed classified CIA documents and confirmed that Clay Shaw had indeed worked for the agency in the 1940s and 1950s under Domestic Contact Division, recruiting and managing agency assets. The CIA had denied any connection to Shaw during his trial, a denial that was later proven to be a lie. So we have a CIA operative working with a CIA Mafia intermediary connected to the alleged assassin in a sea controlled by a Mafia boss who openly threatened to kill Kennedy. And the district attorney who tried to prosecute this conspiracy was destroyed professionally, his reputation shredded by a coordinated media campaign that painted him as a delusional conspiracy theorist. Garrison's investigation was dismissed, his evidence was ignored, and the case was closed. But decades later, when the classified documents finally emerged, Garrison was vindicated. He was right. There was a conspiracy, and it involved exactly the people and institutions he identified. Let's also talk about George de Mohrenschraudt, a Russian-born petroleum geologist who became Lee Harvey Oswald's closest friend and mentor after Oswald returned from the Soviet Union in 1962. De Mohrenschraudt was a fascinating character. He was highly educated, well-traveled, and moved in elite social circles in Dallas, including connections to the oil industry and the white Russian émigré community. He also had documented connections to the CIA. Declassified documents confirm that de Mohrenschraudt provided information to the agency and was in contact with CIA officers in the years before the assassination. So, why would a sophisticated, well-connected man like de Mohrenschraudt befriend a poor, uneducated ex-Marine like Oswald, unless Oswald was an intelligence asset and de Mohrenschraudt was his handler? De Mohrenschraudt helped Oswald find jobs, introduced him to people in the Russian émigré community, and stayed in close contact with him throughout 1962 and early 1963. Then, in April 1963, just months before the assassination, de Mohrenschraudt suddenly left the United States for Haiti, where he remained for several years. He later returned to the U.S. and lived quietly until 1977, when the House Select Committee on Assassinations contacted him to testify. On March 29, 1977, on the same day he was scheduled to be interviewed by an investigator for the committee, George de Mohrenschraudt was found dead from a shotgun blast to the head. The death was ruled a suicide. He left a note, but like David Ferrie's notes, it was undated and unsigned. Another key witness, dead before he could testify. Are we supposed to believe this is all coincidence? That multiple witnesses with direct knowledge of Oswald's intelligence connections all died suddenly, often violently, before they could testify under oath? The statistical probability of this many key witnesses dying within a few years of the assassination, particularly during periods when investigations were reopened, is astronomically low. Yet that's exactly what happened. Over 100 material witnesses to the Kennedy assassination died in unusual circumstances in the decade following November 23, 1963. Some were murdered, some died in accidents, some committed suicide, some died of sudden illnesses. The pattern is undeniable. If you knew too much about what really happened in Dallas, your life expectancy dropped dramatically. And what about Jack Ruby, the man who silenced Oswald? Ruby's connections to organized crime are well documented, but his connections to law enforcement are equally important. Ruby was an FBI informant, providing information on criminal activities in Dallas in exchange for protection.
He also had documented connections to the Dallas Police Department, frequently visiting the police station and befriending officers. This access allowed him to enter the basement of police headquarters on November 24, 1963, just as Oswald was being transferred, and shoot him at point-blank range on live television. Ruby claimed he acted spontaneously, out of grief for Kennedy and sympathy for Jackie Kennedy, but the evidence suggests premeditation. Ruby was seen at Parkland Hospital shortly after Kennedy died, trying to gain access to the area. He was seen at the Dallas Police Department multiple times in the 48 hours before he shot Oswald. and witnesses later testified that Ruby seemed to be waiting for the right moment to strike. After his arrest, Ruby repeatedly tried to tell authorities that there was more to the story. He begged to be taken to Washington so he could testify before the Warren Commission. He told reporters, quote, "The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives. The people who had so much to gain and had such an ulterior motive for putting me in the position I'm in will never let the true facts come above board to the world." When asked directly if there was a conspiracy, Ruby replied, "Yes, there's a lot more involved than what meets the eye." He desperately wanted to reveal what he knew, but he was never given the opportunity. Ruby died in prison in January 1967 of lung cancer, but there's evidence suggesting he may have been injected with cancer cells. His doctor noted that Ruby's cancer was unusually aggressive and metastasized far faster than typical lung cancer. Ruby himself believed he was injected with cancer to silence him. Crazy? Maybe. But given everything else we know, is it really beyond the realm of possibility? Let's pause for a moment and consider what we've established so far. Kennedy threatened the Federal Reserve's monetary monopoly with Executive Order 11110. He threatened the CIA's operational autonomy by firing its leadership and promising to dismantle the agency. He threatened organized crime by launching an unprecedented federal crackdown. All three institutions had motive, means, and opportunity. The CIA and the Mafia already had an operational partnership. Oswald had documented connections to CIA operatives and anti-Castro operations. Multiple witnesses with direct knowledge died under suspicious circumstances. The physical evidence of a second shooter was suppressed. The autopsy was manipulated. The investigation was rigged from the start. And the one man who could have revealed the truth, Lee Harvey Oswald, was murdered before he could speak. This isn't speculation. These are documented facts. And when you put them all together, the conclusion is inescapable. President Kennedy was assassinated by a coordinated conspiracy involving elements of the U.S. intelligence community, organized crime, and possibly complicit members of the government itself. But let's go even deeper, because there's one more layer to this conspiracy that we haven't fully explored yet: the role of defense contractors and the military-industrial complex, the very entities that Kennedy warned about in his speeches and that stood to lose billions if his policies had been fully implemented. And if you're still watching at this point, if these revelations are making you question everything you thought you knew about American history, then you need to stay subscribed to this channel. Hit that notification bell, because we're about to reveal the final piece of the puzzle, the one that connects all of these threads into a single, terrifying picture of who really controls America. Don't miss what's coming next. Kennedy's presidency marked a dramatic shift in American foreign policy, particularly regarding Vietnam. When Kennedy took office in 1961, there were fewer than 1,000 U.S. military advisors in South Vietnam. By the time of his death in November 1963, that number had increased to approximately 16,000. But here's what most people don't know. Just weeks before his assassination, Kennedy signed National Security Action Memorandum 263, which ordered the withdrawal of 1,000 military personnel from Vietnam by the end of 1963 and the complete withdrawal of all U.S. military forces by the end of 1965. This wasn't speculation or campaign rhetoric. It was official policy, documented in a presidential directive. Kennedy was planning to end American involvement in Vietnam entirely.
He had concluded, based on his experience with the Bay of Pigs and the Cuban Missile Crisis, that military intervention in Southeast Asia would be a catastrophic mistake. He told aides that he wanted to withdraw, but needed to wait until after the 1964 election to avoid being labeled as soft on communism. Once re-elected, he planned to disengage completely. But Kennedy never got the chance to implement that policy. He was killed on November 22, 1963, and just 4 days later, on November 26, President Johnson signed National Security Action Memorandum 273, which reversed Kennedy's withdrawal order and escalated U.S. involvement in Vietnam.
U.S. military commitment in Vietnam. Within 2 years, Johnson had deployed over 500,000 troops to Vietnam, launching a war that would kill 58,000 Americans and over 2 million Vietnamese. Who benefited from this escalation? Defense contractors. The Vietnam War generated hundreds of billions of dollars in defense spending. Companies like Bell Helicopter, Boeing, Lockheed, and General Dynamics made fortunes selling helicopters, bombers, fighter jets, and weapons systems to the Pentagon. The war created a perpetual demand for military hardware, turning the defense industry into one of the most profitable sectors of the American economy. And these companies had deep connections to the political establishment. Lyndon Johnson himself had extensive ties to defense contractors through his work in the Senate and his relationships with Texas oil and military industrialists. Brown and Root, a Texas-based construction and engineering firm that would later become part of Halliburton, was one of Johnson's primary financial backers and made billions from Vietnam-related contracts. So let's add this to our list of motives. The Federal Reserve wanted Kennedy dead because of Executive Order 11110. The CIA wanted him dead because he threatened their power. The Mafia wanted him dead because of the Justice Department's crackdown. And now we can add the military-industrial complex, which wanted Kennedy dead because his plans to withdraw from Vietnam would have cost them hundreds of billions of dollars in future contracts. These weren't separate conspiracies. They were overlapping interests, all converging on a single target, John F. Kennedy. And they had the resources, the expertise, and the institutional will to make it happen. But there's even more. Let's talk about Kennedy's relationship with Israel and the nuclear issue, because this is another motive that's largely been ignored by mainstream historians. In the early 1960s, Israel was secretly developing nuclear weapons at the Dimona reactor facility in the Negev desert. The Israeli government claimed Dimona was a peaceful research facility, but U.S. intelligence knew better. Kennedy demanded that Israel allow regular inspections of Dimona to verify it wasn't being used for weapons production. Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion resisted, and the dispute became increasingly heated. Kennedy sent multiple letters to Ben-Gurion, insisting on inspections and threatening to cut off U.S. aid if Israel didn't comply. In one particularly blunt letter dated May 1963, Kennedy wrote, "This government's commitment to and support of Israel could be seriously jeopardized if it should be thought that we were unable to obtain reliable information on a subject as vital to peace as the question of Israel's effort in the nuclear field." The letter essentially threatened to end the U.S.-Israel alliance if inspections weren't allowed. Ben-Gurion resigned shortly after receiving this letter, officially citing personal reasons, but many historians believe the dispute with Kennedy was the real cause. His successor, Levi Eshkol,
agreed to allow limited inspections, but they were carefully staged, and inspectors were never allowed to see the full scope of Israel's nuclear program. Kennedy died in November 1963. Lyndon Johnson became president and immediately dropped the pressure on Israel regarding nuclear inspections. The U.S.-Israel relationship was restored, American aid continued to flow, and Israel successfully developed nuclear weapons without further interference. By 1967, Israel had multiple operational nuclear warheads. Today, Israel is believed to possess between 80 and 400 nuclear weapons, making it one of the world's major nuclear powers, all developed in secret with American acquiescence after Kennedy's death. Did Israel have a motive to eliminate Kennedy? Absolutely. Did they have the capability? That's harder to prove, but intelligence services have carried out assassinations before. And did the timing of Kennedy's death benefit Israel's nuclear ambitions? Undeniably. Now, I'm not claiming that Israeli intelligence orchestrated the Kennedy assassination. The evidence for CIA-Mafia involvement is far stronger. But what I am saying is that Kennedy made powerful enemies across multiple sectors: banking, intelligence, organized crime, defense contractors, and foreign governments. Each of these entities had reasons to want him dead. Each had the resources to carry out an assassination, and each benefited directly from his removal. The conspiracy that killed Kennedy wasn't carried out by a single group. It was a convergence of interests, a coordination of forces that all recognized Kennedy as an existential threat and worked together, directly or indirectly, to eliminate him. And here's the truly chilling part. They got away with it. The Warren Commission whitewashed the investigation. The media accepted the official story. The American public was traumatized and wanted closure, not more questions.
And the institutions responsible for the assassination not only avoided accountability, but emerged stronger than ever. The Federal Reserve's power expanded. The CIA's budget and authority grew. The Mafia, despite the crackdown, survived and adapted. Defense contractors became permanent fixtures of American government. And the precedent was set. If a president threatens the deep state will remove him. This wasn't just about killing one man. It was about sending a message to every future president. Don't challenge the system, or you'll end up like Kennedy. Let's examine some final pieces of evidence that seal this case. In 2017, when those 2,891 documents were released, several contained bombshells that went largely unreported by mainstream media. One CIA memo from 1975 discussed the agency's use of journalists as intelligence assets, including reporters covering the Kennedy assassination. The memo explicitly stated that CIA-affiliated journalists were used to discredit conspiracy theories and promote the lone gunman narrative. In other words, the CIA wasn't just covering up their involvement, they were actively shaping public perception through media manipulation. Operation Mockingbird, the CIA program that placed agents and assets in major news organizations, was in full effect during the 1960s. The official story you've been told your entire life wasn't just accepted by the media, it was manufactured by intelligence operatives. Another document revealed that the CIA had been monitoring Oswald since 1959, when he defected to the Soviet Union, and had opened a 201 file on him, indicating he was a person of significant intelligence interest. Despite this, the CIA claimed to the Warren Commission that Oswald was not on their radar before the assassination. That was a lie.
They had been tracking him for 4 years. Why would they lie about this unless they had something to hide? Unless Oswald was more than just a person of interest? Unless he was an asset? There's also the curious case of E. Howard Hunt, a CIA operative who later became infamous for his role in the Watergate break-in. In 2007, shortly before his death, Hunt released a confession in which he claimed to have knowledge of the Kennedy assassination conspiracy. Hunt stated that he was approached by CIA officials to participate in the plot, but declined. He named several CIA officers and anti-Castro operatives who were allegedly involved, including David Morales, a CIA assassin specialist. Hunt's confession was largely dismissed as the ramblings of a dying man seeking attention, but his story aligns perfectly with the documentary evidence we've been discussing. Hunt had no reason to lie at that point. He was dying and wanted to unburden himself, and his account adds yet another layer of confirmation to the CIA-Mafia conspiracy. And let's not forget about Antonio Veciana, a Cuban exile and founder of Alpha 66, an anti-Castro paramilitary group. In the 1970s, Veciana testified to congressional investigators that his CIA handler, a man he knew as Maurice Bishop, met with Lee Harvey Oswald in Dallas in September 1963, just 2 months before the assassination. Veciana described seeing Bishop and Oswald in the lobby of a Dallas office building, discussing something in hushed tones. Years later, Veciana identified Maurice Bishop as David Atlee Phillips, a high-ranking CIA officer who ran anti-Castro operations in Dallas and had extensive connections to Cuban exile groups. Phillips denied the allegation, and the CIA claimed there was no evidence of any officer using the alias Maurice Bishop. But multiple witnesses corroborated Veciana's story, and researchers later found documentation linking Phillips to anti-Castro operations in Dallas during 1963. So we have CIA operatives meeting with Oswald months before the assassination. We have CIA-Mafia partnerships active at the time. We have documented media manipulation by intelligence assets. We have suppressed forensic evidence. We have murdered witnesses. We have manipulated autopsies. We have a rush to judgment by a compromised commission. And we have multiple institutions with clear motive, means, and opportunity. At what point does this stop being conspiracy theory and start being conspiracy fact? How much evidence do we need before we acknowledge what happened? The American government, or rather elements within it, conspired to assassinate their own president because he threatened the power structure they served. And here's what should terrify every American. If they could kill a sitting president in daylight, stage a cover-up, control the investigation, manipulate the media, and get away with it completely unscathed, what else are they capable of? What other operations have been carried out in secret? What other truths have been buried under layers of classification and lies? The Kennedy assassination wasn't an anomaly. It was a demonstration of power, a warning, a message that even the most powerful man in the country is expendable if he threatens the system.
This is why, even 62 years later, thousands of documents related to the assassination remain classified. If the official story were true, if Oswald really acted alone and there was no conspiracy, why would any documents still need to be hidden? The National Archives has repeatedly delayed full disclosure, citing national security concerns. What national security concerns could possibly still exist more than 6 decades after the event? Unless those documents contain evidence that directly implicates government agencies, intelligence officials, and institutional conspirators. Unless releasing them would prove, beyond any doubt, that the American people have been lied to for over 60 years. So what can you do with this information? First,
Don't just take my word for it. The evidence I've presented isn't based on speculation or hearsay. It's based on declassified documents, congressional investigations, witness testimony, and forensic analysis. You can find these sources yourself. The JFK Records Collection at the National Archives is publicly accessible. The House Select Committee on Assassinations report is available online. The CIA's own internal documents, released through FOIA requests, confirm many of the connections I've discussed. Do your own research, read the primary sources, and draw your own conclusions. Second, demand full transparency. Every remaining classified document related to the Kennedy assassination should be released immediately. There is no legitimate reason to continue hiding this information. If your elected representatives claim to care about transparency and accountability, hold them to it. Demand that they push for complete declassification. The truth belongs to the American people, not to bureaucrats and intelligence agencies with vested interests in maintaining secrecy. Third, recognize that what happened to Kennedy is part of a larger pattern. The deep state, the permanent security apparatus that operates behind the scenes regardless of who's in office, is real. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's documented fact. And it has demonstrated repeatedly that it will protect its power and interests at any cost. Understanding this doesn't mean giving up on democracy. It means understanding the actual terrain of power so that meaningful reform becomes possible. You can't fix a problem you refuse to acknowledge exists. Let me bring this investigation to a close with a final reflection. On November 22, 1963, something died in America beyond just a president. A kind of innocence died. The belief that the system fundamentally worked, that institutions could be trusted, that truth would prevail. That belief shattered in Dealey Plaza. And maybe that loss of innocence was necessary. Maybe Americans needed to confront the reality that power doesn't voluntarily limit itself, that institutions protect themselves above all else, that the official story is often a lie designed to maintain control. The assassination of John F. Kennedy was a turning point, not because of what Kennedy himself represented, though he certainly represented change and challenged power, but because of what the assassination revealed about the nature of American power itself. The truth is this: President Kennedy was killed because he threatened the Federal Reserve's monetary monopoly, the CIA's operational autonomy, organized crime's survival, and the military-industrial profit stream. The assassination was carried out by elements within the CIA, working in coordination with mafia assets, with possible foreknowledge or complicity from individuals in the Johnson administration and other government officials. Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy, an intelligence asset with a carefully constructed paper trail designed to make him the perfect scapegoat. He was killed by Jack Ruby, a mob-connected FBI informant, to ensure he could never testify. The Warren Commission was a cover-up, not an investigation. The media was manipulated to promote the official story. Witnesses were intimidated, murdered, or ignored. Evidence was suppressed, destroyed, or fabricated. And the conspiracy succeeded completely. The institutions responsible not only avoided accountability, but emerged more powerful than ever. And the American people were told to accept the lie and move on. But some of us haven't moved on. Some of us have spent decades piecing together the truth from declassified documents, witness testimony, forensic evidence, and logical analysis. And the truth is finally emerging, piece by piece, document by document, witness by witness. The conspiracy that killed Kennedy is being exposed, not by official investigations, those have all been compromised, but by independent researchers, journalists, historians, and citizens who refuse to accept lies as truth. The full story may never be completely known. Too many witnesses are dead. Too many documents are destroyed or still classified. Too many conspirators took their secrets to the grave.
But we know enough. We know enough to say with certainty, John F. Kennedy was assassinated by a conspiracy involving the highest levels of American institutional power. And that conspiracy has never been held accountable. So here's my final challenge to you. Don't just watch this video and move on. Don't let this information disappear into the noise of daily life. Share this video with people you know. Discuss it, debate it, research it further. Demand answers from your representatives. Demand full declassification. Demand accountability. Because if we don't hold power accountable for what happened 62 years ago, we ensure that it will happen again. The precedent has been set. A president can be killed for threatening institutional power. And unless that precedent is confronted, unless the truth is fully acknowledged and those responsible are exposed posthumously, the lesson stands. Cross the deep state and you'll pay with your life. That's the real legacy of November 22nd, 1963. Not just a murdered president, but a murdered republic, replaced by a system where unelected, unaccountable institutions hold the real power, and elected officials serve at their pleasure. Understanding what happened to Kennedy means understanding what America became after his death. A country where the official story is a lie, where power operates in shadows, where truth is whatever they tell you it is. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Knowledge is power, and now you have the knowledge. What you do with it is up to you. If this investigation opened your eyes to truths you never knew existed, if it made you question the official narratives you've been told your entire life, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss future investigations into the conspiracies they tried to bury, the lies they told, and the truths they don't want you to know. This is just the beginning. There are so many more secrets to uncover, so many more lies to expose, and I'm going to bring them all to light, one investigation at a time. Share this video with everyone you know. Post it on social media. Make sure this information spreads, because the only way we defeat institutional lies is with citizen-driven truth. The only way we hold power accountable is by refusing to forget, refusing to accept their version of reality, and demanding the full truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes them. Thank you for watching. Thank you for seeking truth. And remember, they lied about Kennedy. What else have they lied about?